In the previous class, I told you what is Gauss law and then what do we mean by electric flux and the relation between flux and electric field. Now, today we will study the proof of Gauss law and also the applications based on Gauss law for determining electric field for continuous charge distribution. So before we start with the proof of Gauss law, look at the two basic terms, plane angle and solid angle. So we have already studied the definition of plane and solid angle in units and measurements in first year. But just to revise, so look at what is a plane angle. Okay, say you have a curve AB which is a part of a circle of length L and the center of the circle is at O. So I'll join the line from O to A and O to B. This is radius R. Then the angle at this particular point, we call it as theta, which is nothing but plane angle. Angle subtended by an arc of length L and radius R. Theta is equal to length of the arc divided by radius. But if this arc length becomes very small, I'll call this as AB, whose length is delta L, and this is the point O, which is the center. Join O to A and O to B. Select the midpoint of A and B. The line joining from O to midpoint of AB. If I write it as R, then this angle, which is small, we write it as delta theta, and then plane angle delta theta is equal to delta L divided by R if the line AB is perpendicular to R. But if this line AB is not perpendicular to R, so I'll take this as line AB, which is inclined, and somewhere here you have the point O. Join O to A and O to B. This is the center of A and B. The line joining from O to this center is along the dotted line, which is not perpendicular to AB. So write a line which is perpendicular to AB. The angle between them is alpha. In such a case, this angle delta theta will get modified. I'll extend it and drop a perpendicular. We know this distance is small r. Then this vertical line, okay, if this length AB is delta L, then the vertical distance would become delta L cos alpha. Then plane angle is written as delta theta is equal to delta L cos alpha divided by R. Now if this is a closed surface, say we have taken a small length of the arc, if the length of the arc becomes a closed surface, then we get a circle, angle subtended by a point inside a closed surface at its center. Delta theta would be angle of a circle, that is 2 pi radians. But if this point lies outside, say this is a closed surface, the angle subtended by a point which is lying outside the closed surface, okay, this is your point, would obviously be 0. So remember these 5 points regarding plane angle. This is a surface and your point is here. These are the two ends. The plane angle subtended is this much. Let's call it a sum angle. Now if I make it little lesser in length, that means I'm closing the surface A and B and your point is outside, join it, angle is decreasing. And finally, if it is a closed surface for a point outside, the angle subtended would become 0. So these are the 5 points that you should know regarding plane angle. I repeat, it is length of the arc by radius, theta, if it is a part of a circle, If AB is extremely small, we write it as delta theta as delta L by R, provided R is perpendicular to AB or delta L. If AB is not perpendicular to R, then it is delta theta equals to delta L cos alpha by R. For any closed surface, angle subtended at the center is 360 degree or 2 pi radians. And for a point outside the closed surface, angle subtended would be 0. Okay, now look at similar points for solid angle. So instead of a line AB or a curve AB, assume that we have a surface, a circular surface whose surface area is S. Now select a point O. The angle subtended by joining all the points on the periphery of this surface to O. This angle, we call it as omega, and omega is called the solid angle. Solid angle omega is equal to, because it's not a one-dimensional structure, this is your surface. If surface area is S and radius is R, then S by R square will give you solid angle, like the angle of a cone subtended at the center. Then if this area becomes extremely small, I'll call this as ds. This is the center. The point is O. Join all the points on the periphery to this point O. Then this angle becomes d omega. Then we write solid angle d omega as ds divided by R square, where R is the distance from center to the point O. Now here this surface ds is perpendicular to R. We have written solid angle as ds by R square. If the surface is not perpendicular, okay, I'll assume that this is the surface and the point is somewhere here, the midpoint of the circle. Now join all the points on the periphery. We call this angle as solid angle. So for this surface, this is the normal. Now I will extend it. Take this as the surface area, the dotted line. So if the original surface is ds and this angle is alpha, we can call the shaded portions area as ds into cos alpha. Then solid angle will be written as ds cos alpha divided by R square, where R is the distance from center to the point O. So just like a plane angle is subtending an angle of 2 pi radians at the center of a closed surface, if it is a closed sphere or any closed surface, angle subtended at the center, the solid angle, would become 4 pi radians. And similar to this, if your point is outside the sphere, then angle subtended by a point outside the sphere would be 0. I repeat, solid angle is angle subtended by a surface at a point O, which is at a distance R. Omega is equal to S by R. If this area is extremely small, d omega is ds divided by R square, provided ds is perpendicular to R. If ds is not perpendicular to R and the normal is making an angle alpha with R vector, then d omega is ds cos alpha divided by R square. The angle subtended or the solid angle subtended by a closed sphere would be 0 for a point inside. If the point lies outside the sphere, solid angle will become 0. Okay, now that we know what is a plane angle and solid angle, let us start with the proof of Gauss law. Okay, before we prove Gauss law, look at the statement. What did we prove in the statement? What is the statement of Gauss law? The total flux passing through any closed surface, that is integral of E dot ds, is equal to the net charge enclosed by the Gaussian surface divided by epsilon naught. Okay, now we are going to prove this assuming that Coulomb's law to be true. From Coulomb's law, or by taking the help of Coulomb's law, we are going to give the proof for Gauss law. But for proving the Gauss law, we are going to consider three different cases. The first case is flux produced by or flux due to internal charges. Okay, the charge is inside the closed surface. We are going to prove that flux is equal to Q net divided by epsilon naught. So for that, consider one closed surface. So assume that this is a closed surface and somewhere here you have a charge Q. And now I will select a small surface whose surface area is ds, and the direction of this surface is normal to it. So this is the direction of ds vector. Now because we have selected the charge here, field produced by the charge would be in the outward direction. This is the direction of electric field vector. I'll consider the angle between them as alpha. Angle between E, that is R vector, and area vector is taken as alpha. Now I'll find out what is the flux passing through this small surface. So we know flux is defined as E dot ds. So d phi is equal to E dot ds, or d phi is equal to E into ds into cosine of angle between them. So I'll write it as cos alpha. And we know due to a point charge, electric field at a distance small r is given by 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q divided by r square into ds cos alpha, or d phi is equal to Q by 4 pi epsilon naught. Write the remaining terms in one bracket. Ds cos alpha divided by r square, and we already know this ds cos alpha by r square is nothing but defined as solid angle. So Q by 4 pi epsilon naught into d omega. Now this is a flux passing through this small surface. I want the flux emerging from the complete surface, and since it's a closed surface and the charge is inside it, the solid angle enclosed by a closed surface is 4 pi radians. So if I integrate the relation, phi is equal to Q by 4 pi epsilon naught. Integral of dq will give me the total angle subtended by any closed surface is nothing but equal to 4 pi. So 4 pi and 4 pi gets cancelled. We are left with Q divided by epsilon naught. So we started from phi and proved that phi is equal to Q divided by epsilon naught. So this is the first case for proving the Gauss law when your charge is inside a Gaussian surface. Now look at case 2. In case 2, if the flux due to external charges. So in the previous case, we have seen that if the charge is inside, then the flux is Q divided by epsilon naught. So if this charge lies outside the Gaussian surface, just now we have proved in the solid angle that the total angle subtended for any external point lying outside the closed surface, d omega would be 0. Since d omega is 0, phi would become 0. Okay, if this is your surface and the point charge is outside the surface, the solid angle subtended by any closed surface is 0. So since Q is 0, flux also would become 0. Okay, now the third case of proof of Gauss law. Now we are going to determine or prove Gauss law for both internal and external charges. 'So let us assume one Gaussian surface. one surface. The charges inside it, there are a number of charges. Let us suppose Q1, Q2, Q3 and so on up to Qn are inside the surface. And outside the surface also we have some charges Q1 dash, Q2 dash, Q3 dash at various positions. Now we need to prove the Gauss law for this type of combination. For that, let us assume that at any point P on the Gaussian surface, the total electric field at the point P would be, we know from superposition principle, it is a field produced by all the charges in the space. So it would be field produced by the first charge Q1, field produced by second charge, it is a vector addition, plus field produced by third charge which is inside the Gaussian surface and continuous, plus even field due to Q1 dash, Q2 dash and Q3 dash. These fields I'll call it as Q1 dash, E1 dash, sorry, E2 dash, all are vectors, and so on up to En dash. So this gives me the electric field at the point P on the Gaussian surface due to all the charges which are present. Now let us start with the flux. So the total flux, we know it is integral of E dot ds, okay, where ds is a small surface area which I have selected on this Gaussian surface. Now in the place of E I will write all these values. So your integral will become integral of E1 into ds plus integral of E2 dot ds, and this series will continue. Similarly, integral of E1 dash into ds dot product plus integral of E2 dash into ds and so on up to n terms. Now let the angle between E1 and ds, because it's a dot product, we know just now we have seen if the charge is inside the Gaussian surface, then flux is given by Q by epsilon naught in the first case. So integral of E1 dot ds will be Q1 divided by epsilon naught because it's inside, plus E2 dot ds is because of this charge which is inside the Gaussian surface. So Q2 by epsilon naught from case 1 and so on up to Qn divided by epsilon naught. Now come to E1 dash. This field is because of the charge which is outside. So in the case 2 I have shown you that if charge is outside this surface, E dot ds would become 0. Similarly, because of Q2 dash also will be 0 and this will continue. Now if I add all of them, we get this as Q1 plus Q2 and so on up to Qn whole divided by epsilon naught. That is nothing but the net charge enclosed by the surface divided by epsilon naught. That is, the flux phi is equal to the total charge enclosed divided by epsilon naught. So this proof clearly tells you that the electric field term what we write on the left hand side of the equation is because of all the charges in the space, whereas the right hand side Q represents only the charge which is inside the Gaussian surface. So this is a proof of Gauss law for the case 3. Now coming to applications of Gauss law. So the first application is to determine electric field due to a long linear charge distribution. So consider one long linear charge distribution. The two ends are tending to infinity, infinitely long, on which positive charge is uniformly distributed, and the linear charge density is lambda. Okay, we take the linear charge density as charge per unit length as lambda. Call this as equation 1. So we need to find out the electric field at a point P, which is at a distance small r from this distribution. For that, I am going to make use of Gauss law. We know the statement for Gauss law. Total flux phi is equal to integral of E dot ds over any closed Gaussian surface should be Q divided by epsilon naught, where Q is the charge inside the Gaussian surface. Now first we need to construct a Gaussian surface around this linear charge distribution. So choose a Gaussian surface where electric field remains constant. So I have chosen a cylindrical Gaussian surface passing through this point P. Radius of the cylinder is r. Let its length be L. And the charge enclosed by this cylinder, I'll assume it as Q. Remember, Q by L is nothing but linear charge density. Now this cylinder has 3 surfaces, 2 plane surfaces and 1 curved surface. So this is a plane surface. Again bottom we have another plane surface, and this one is, the remaining part is a curved surface. And we know electric field is directed away from positive charge. So if you indicate the direction of electric field, this is the direction of electric field. For this surface, area vector is outward normal. I'll call this as ds1. Again, electric field on the bottom surface is away from positive charge, and area vector is ds2, which is perpendicular to E. Whereas take a curved surface on this cylinder, area vector is outward ds3. Electric field is also in the outward direction, that is capital E. So angle between E and ds3 is 0 degrees. Now start with the Gauss law relation. Total flux for all the 3 surfaces. I will write the closed integral of E dot ds as integral of E dot ds1 for the first surface plus integral of E into ds2, E dot ds2 for the second surface, plus integral of E dot ds3 for the third surface should be the charge enclosed is Q divided by epsilon naught. Since angle between E and ds1 is 90 degree, E into ds1 into cos 90, this would become 0. Even second term will also become 0 because angle between E and ds2 is 90, cos 90 is 0. Now for the third surface, I will write it as E into ds into cos 0, which is 1. That is Q divided by epsilon naught. Since electric field everywhere on this curved surface is constant because it is equidistant from this long linear charge distribution, E comes out of the integral. Integral of ds is Q divided by epsilon naught. And now we know integral of ds will give me the total curved surface area of the cylinder, and the curved surface area of the cylinder is 2 pi rl. So E into 2 pi rl is Q divided by epsilon naught. So from here we can write E is equal to Q divided by 2 pi epsilon naught R into L. But we know Q by L is nothing but the linear charge density. So electric field can be written as lambda by 2 pi epsilon naught R. So this gives you the electric field produced by a very long linear charge distribution. And if you observe this, lambda is constant, electric field is inversely related to R. So as you go away and away from this linear charge distribution or the long linear charge distribution, field will start decreasing. So what is the nature of graph between E and R? If I plot a graph between R and E, As r increases, electric field will start decreasing. So it should be a rectangular hyperbola. E into r is constant. So this is the graph between E and R. Now coming to the second application of Gauss law, this is for determining the electric field due to a plane sheet of charges. So assume that this is an infinite large plane sheet which is completely given a positive charge, and let the surface charge density be sigma. Okay, we know surface charge density is represented as sigma. Sigma is equal to charge per unit area. Call this as equation 1. And now we want to determine the electric field at a point P for this plane sheet of charges. So we need to construct a Gaussian surface. So select a cylindrical Gaussian surface passing through the sheet. Okay, P is the point where we are determining it, and this Gaussian surface is enclosing a certain charge inside it. So this charge, I will write it as Q is equal to sigma into A, where A is the area of this plane surface. The same area will be enclosed here. So the charge Q enclosed by this cylindrical Gaussian surface is sigma into A. And now let us apply Gauss law for this. We know the statement of Gauss law. Okay, the statement of Gauss law is the total flux enclosed by a Gaussian surface phi is equal to integral E dot ds, which is equal to the charge enclosed divided by epsilon naught. For that, we will consider three different surfaces for this cylinder. The area vector for the plane surface is outward and having a magnitude A. Electric field due to positive charge is also outward. So E and A are in same direction. Now come to the region on the other side of the cylinder. Due to positive charge, electric field is always outward, that is E, and area vector is also outward, whose area I took it as A. For the curved surface, area vector is outward normal and electric field is E. So angle has become 90 degrees. So now I will write the total flux. Flux through the first surface, this is what I am calling it as first surface, plus flux through second surface, plus flux through third surface, that is cylindrical surface, should be the charge enclosed. Charge enclosed is sigma into A divided by epsilon naught. And now I will calculate the flux. For the first surface, E and A are in same direction. So E dot A will be E into A into cos 0 plus. For the second surface also it is E into A into cos 0. Whereas for the curved surface, field and area vector are perpendicular to each other. So flux would become 0 since cos 90 is 0, should be sigma into A divided by epsilon naught. Now simplify the relation. 2 into E into A would be sigma A by epsilon naught. A gets cancelled. We get the electric field as sigma by 2 epsilon naught. So this will be the answer for electric field produced by a plane sheet of charges, which is sigma divided by 2 epsilon naught. And if you observe this relation, it is independent of the distance. So that means whether you are close to the plate or far away from the plate, if the plate is of infinite size, then electric field is constant. So we call such an electric field as a uniform field. I repeat, if the sheet is of infinitely large, then electric field produced by this infinite sheet of charges is a uniform field. Okay, so here I will represent the field lines for an infinite large plane sheet of charges. The field lines are directed away from it, and the nature of field is uniform. So this is a uniform field produced by the plate. So if you are asked to draw a graph between electric field and distance from the plate for infinite plane sheet of charges, since it is independent of distance, the nature of graph between E and R would be a straight line, okay, whose value is sigma by 2 epsilon naught. It does not vary with distance. Now, regarding infinite plane sheet of charges, look at two simple applications. So there are two infinite large sheet of charges with surface charge density sigma 1 and sigma 2, and they are asking you to determine electric field strength in region 1, 2 and 3. Okay, in the three regions we are going to determine the electric field. The first region, then the middle one is the second region, and the last region outside the plates. So for that, let us see how to use the result what we have just now studied. So first let us start with the first plate. We know if the surface charge density is sigma 1, electric field produced by this plate is given by sigma by 2 epsilon naught, as we have seen in the previous application. And now to determine the total electric field in the first, second and third regions, so for the time being, assume that this region is absent. I am closing the second surface. Only we have sigma 1 as a plane sheet of charges. We know when the charge is positive, electric field in region 1 produced by the first plate is directed away, and we call this as E1. I repeat, the electric field produced by the first surface is E1, which is away from positive. In the second region also it is away from positive, so I will give the direction. This is the direction produced by E1. Now in the third region, if this is the third region, electric field produced is again E1, which is directed away from the first plate on either sides. Now I will write the magnitude of E1. We know E1 is sigma by 2 epsilon naught. Sigma 1 is the surface charge density. And now I will cover the first region. This is your second plate, which is going to produce a field E2. Now give the direction of field produced by the second plate in all the three regions. Since third region is on the right side of the plate, field produced is away from it, magnitude is E2. In the second region, the field is away from positive due to this second plate. I'll call this E2. And here also it is away because for this plate, the whole field on the left side is away from it, right side is this side. Call this as E2. Okay, now remove this. Now look at the two vectors. In region 1, E1 as well as E2 are acting in negative x direction. I'll write the magnitude of E2. It is sigma 2 divided by 2 epsilon naught. Now the electric field in region 1, now I am writing it as a vector, is E1 plus E2. Direction is minus I cap. Now you can put the values of E1 and E2. You will get sigma 1 plus sigma 2 by 2 epsilon naught, and direction is minus I cap. Then coming to region 2. For the second region, so observe the second region. E1 is directed towards positive and E2 is directed towards negative. Since one vector is plus I and another is in opposite direction, the net field would be E1 minus E2 in I cap direction. So when you put the values of E1 minus E2, you will get sigma 1 minus sigma 2 by 2 epsilon naught, and direction is I cap. Then coming to the third region, you can clearly see in the third region both the vectors are in same direction. So we add the vectors, answer would be same as E1 but direction is opposite. So you get sigma 1 plus sigma 2 by 2 epsilon naught, and direction is plus I cap. So this is how you can find out the electric field in all the three regions. This is the field in the first region outside the plate. This is the field in between the plates, and E3 gives you the field which is again outside the second plate. So this is how you can determine the electric field. Now come to the second case. In the second case also, we have one positively charged infinite sheet, second is a negatively charged infinite sheet. So just like in the previous question, cover the first surface, assume the first surface is second surface is absent, give the direction. Due to the positive field or positive plate, field is always directed away, E1, away from this, E1, away, E1. Now cover the second surface. Now this is a negatively charged plate. Field is always directed towards a negative charge. So this is E2. This is your negative plate towards E2. Even here I'll give the direction. This is the direction of E2. Now remove this. Now look at the two vectors. In region 1, we are observing that E1 and E2 are opposite to each other. But when you're writing the magnitude, look at the magnitude. E1 is sigma 1 by 2 epsilon naught. Magnitude of E2 is sigma 2 by 2 epsilon naught. Don't make a mistake writing E2 as negative. That negative sign of the charges is only direction. Magnitude will never be negative. So sigma 1 has a magnitude sigma 1, E1 has a magnitude sigma 1 by 2 epsilon naught, E2 has a magnitude sigma 2 by 2 epsilon naught. And now write even. One vector is back, another is forward. So you can write it as E1 minus E2 in minus I cap direction, because I took E1 more and E2 less, depends on sigma 1 and sigma 2. So since I wrote E1 minus E2, I gave the direction of E1. So put the values, it would be sigma 1 minus sigma 2 by 2 epsilon naught, direction minus I cap. Then field in second region, that means in between the two plates. Both the fields are directed in the same direction. So you will get sigma 1 plus sigma 2 by 2 epsilon naught in I cap direction. And coming to the third field E3, E1 is away, E2 is towards. So again we get E1 minus E2, but direction is plus I cap. So your answer would be sigma 1 minus sigma 2 by 2 epsilon naught into I cap. So this is how we can determine the field for all the three regions when both the charges are positive and both the plates are having negative charge density. And if at all, if the charge densities are equal, that means if sigma 1 becomes equal to sigma 2, that is equal to sigma, you can just remove the suffix and you will get the answer. Like in the first case, it will be sigma plus sigma by 2 epsilon naught, answer will be sigma by epsilon naught. If sigma 1 and sigma 2 become equal, E2 might become 0. So depending on the question, this is how you can determine. But provided these two are infinite plane sheet of charges. Okay, now coming to the third application of Gauss law. This is to determine electric field due to a uniformly charged sphere. So look at this. This is a sphere of radius capital R. Throughout the volume of the sphere, charge is uniformly distributed. And we know volume charge density is represented by rho. Rho I have already defined. It is charge per unit volume. Total charge by total volume, or the small charge divided by small volume. And now they are asking you to determine the electric field at three different positions. One is inside the sphere, another is just outside or on the sphere, and the third one is completely outside the sphere. So let us apply Gauss law for one by one for each one of them. Starting with A. So to find the electric field at this particular point, construct one spherical Gaussian surface. Okay, so this green dotted line represents a spherical Gaussian surface which is at a distance small r. Okay, the first case, electric field at A, which is inside the sphere. So for a distance small r, which is less than the radius. That means the point is lying inside the sphere. So for applying Gauss law, okay, we know the statement of Gauss law. The total flux is integral of closed integral of E dot ds, which is q divided by epsilon naught. So to apply this, first I will select a small Gaussian surface on this dotted line, that means the dotted sphere. So let this be a small surface. The direction of this surface is outward normal, that is ds is directed outward. An electric field produced by all these charges is also in the outward direction. So E and ds are in same direction. So the flux passing through this small surface phi is equal to integral of electric field, I am writing it as E, into, I took a small surface ds and angle between E and ds is 0, cos 0 should be the charge enclosed by this dotted line. I will write it as q dash divided by epsilon naught, because this small sphere is not enclosing all the charges, only a part of the charge. So let us see how to find this value of q dash from rho. Okay, we know you can write this charge as rho into volume, the charge enclosed by the dotted line, because it's uniformly charged, into volume of this smaller sphere, that is 4 by 3 pi into small r cube. So instead of q dash, I can write it as q dash is equal to rho into 4 by 3 pi r cube. Now I will simplify this. Phi should be integral of E into ds, cos 0 is anyway 1. Q dash I am replacing it as surface charge, volume charge density into volume of that smaller sphere, small r cube, divided by epsilon naught. And now we know that electric field is same in magnitude throughout this sphere. Since E is constant, it comes out of integral. E into integral of ds is rho into 4 pi r cube by 3 epsilon naught. So integral of ds will give you the surface area of this sphere. So E into 4 pi r square will give you rho 4 pi r cube by 3 epsilon naught. So simplify, 4 pi and 4 pi gets cancelled, r square and r cube, 2 r's will get cancelled. We will get the electric field inside the sphere as rho into r divided by 3 epsilon naught, where rho represents the surface charge, not surface, it's volume charge density. I repeat, E inside is rho into r divided by 3 epsilon naught. And you can observe this because it's uniformly charged sphere, rho is constant, 3 and epsilon naught are constant. Electric field is directly proportional to distance. That means at center the field would be 0 because r becomes 0. As you start moving towards the surface, field is gradually increasing, linearly increasing, and it will be maximum on the surface. That means when small r becomes equal to capital R, you will get the maximum value. So this is the first case where we are asked to determine the field inside this uniformly charged sphere. Now come to the second bit. The point is at B. You need to find electric field at the point B, which is just outside the sphere. For that, again I need to construct a Gaussian surface passing through the point B. So let us construct a Gaussian surface passing through this particular point B, which is very close, almost touching the surface. And now again I will apply Gauss law. Integral of E dot ds should be q divided by epsilon naught. E is constant everywhere on the sphere, which is directed outward. If I take a small surface, area vector is also directed outward. So integral E into ds into cos 0 is, this is enclosing the total charge q divided by epsilon naught. Since cos 0 is 1 and E is constant, E comes out of integral. E into ds, integral of ds is, now I will replace q as sigma into volume. This time I will take the whole volume of the sphere, okay, volume of this Gaussian surface, 4 by 3 pi r cube divided by epsilon naught, or electric field into integral of ds will give me the total surface area of this red dotted line, that is nothing but 4 pi capital R square, should be rho 4 by 3 pi capital R cube divided by epsilon naught, implies your electric field on the surface of the sphere. So you can simplify, 4 pi gets cancelled, 2 r's also get cancelled. We are left with rho into r divided by 3 epsilon naught. So this is your electric field for a point just outside the sphere. And if you know the total charge on the sphere as capital Q, you can keep this as capital Q itself without modifying it as in terms of rho. Then you can get the electric field. I repeat, if you write this rho as charge by total volume, your answer would be Q by 4 pi R square into epsilon naught. Okay, where Q is the total charge on this particular sphere. So two formulas I gave you, one in terms of density, surface volume charge density, another in terms of the total charge, that is Q. So this is the answer for the field on the surface or at the point B. Now coming to case 3, where you have to select a point which is outside the sphere. Okay, that point is C. So this point is C. Now again I will construct another Gaussian surface passing through C, which is a big volume or big sphere. Assume that this is the dotted line. This is ds, which is directed outward. Area vector is outward. Field is also outward. Again I will apply Gauss law for the third Gaussian surface represented by this orange color line. So let us see how to determine it. So for the third region, electric field at C. Okay, let the radius be r dash. The radius of this orange colored sphere, I am taking it as r dash. And now I will apply Gauss law again. E and ds are again making an angle of 0 degrees. So integral of E ds into cos 0 would be, see, even this sphere is enclosing the complete charge. So we took this total charge as capital Q. So I will write it as capital Q divided by epsilon naught. And now since E is constant everywhere on the sphere, it comes out of integral. And integral of ds will give you the surface area of this orange colored sphere, which is 4 pi into r dash square, should be Q by epsilon naught. I repeat, capital Q is the total charge. So we get electric field as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught total charge divided by r dash square. So this is in terms of capital Q. If you want, you can replace Q in terms of volume charge density also. It is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught into, instead of Q I can write it as rho into 4 by 3 pi r cube divided by r dash square. So electric field is 4 pi will anyway get cancelled, rho r cube by 3 epsilon naught into r dash square. So this also gives you the electric field in terms of volume charge density. So this is in terms of total charge, and the second formula is in terms of in terms of volume charge density. And now if you sum up all the three results, you will observe that field at the center of the sphere is 0. It started increasing linearly according to this relation till you reach the surface. On the surface it was maximum and it is rho r divided by 3 epsilon naught. And as you move outside the sphere, field started decreasing, inversely related to r dash square. So this is how electric field can be determined using Gauss law for 3 different points for a uniformly charged sphere. Okay, now summing up the results what we have studied just now for a volume charge distribution. If this is a sphere with volume charge density rho, just now we have seen that if your point is inside, what is the field at the point A? It is rho into small r divided by 3 epsilon naught. where r is the distance of this point from the center. Then here itself I will write E at O, that means center of the sphere, is 0 since small r becomes a 0. And at the point B, we have seen that the field is maximum and is given by rho into capital R divided by 3 epsilon naught, which can also be written as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught total charge Q divided by R square. So look at this result. This is similar to the field produced by a point charge. We know if there is a point charge Q at the center, field at a distance capital R is given by 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q by R square. So sometimes when subjective questions are asked, they will ask you to prove that the charge or field produced by a uniformly charged sphere on the surface is equivalent to the field produced by a point charge Q placed at its center. I repeat the question. If they are asking you to prove that there is a volume charge distribution, field produced by a volume charge distribution on the surface is similar to the field produced by a point charge placed at the center, then you can use Gauss law and prove that EB is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q by R square. And if you go to a point which is outside the sphere, which is at a distance R dash, then we have got the field EC. Two formulas I will write. One is in terms of rho into R cube by 3 epsilon naught R dash square, or it can also be written as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught total charge is Q by R dash square. So E is inversely related to the distance, square of the distance. Now if I put all these results in the form of a graph, okay, look at how will be the graphical variation of electric field with distance from center. Okay, this is the center O, radius, and beyond the radius. At center the field was 0. Till you reach the radius, field is linearly increasing. It is maximum on the surface, and beyond this field started decreasing and it is proportional to 1 by R dash square. So here E is proportional to small r for a distance inside the sphere. So this is the graphical variation of electric field with respect to distance from center of the sphere. So these are the results that we have studied for uniform volume charge distribution. So here remember one point, that volume charge distribution is only possible for a non-conducting sphere. Non-conducting solid sphere, because if it is a conducting sphere, whenever you charge a conducting sphere, charge will reside only on the surface. We cannot have volume charge distribution for a conducting sphere. So the three results what we have discussed is for a non-conducting solid sphere. Now let us see how to determine the electric field if it is a conducting sphere. Now look at how to determine the electric field for a conducting sphere. Okay, just now I have told you that whenever you take a conducting sphere or a conducting shell, that is a hollow sphere, charge would reside only on the surface. Okay, if this is a conducting sphere, whenever you charge a conducting sphere or a shell is something hollow. I'll assume that this is the thickness of the shell. When you charge it, charge will reside only on the surface. Okay, because of the presence of free electrons, even if you take a solid conducting sphere, the charge given will appear on the surface. So this is for a hollow sphere, hollow conducting sphere. For a solid conducting sphere also. Whenever you charge it, charge will reside only on the surface. And for a non-conducting shell, because there is no mass inside, charge cannot reside without mass, so charge is again present on the surface. So since for all the three cases this is a non-conducting, hollow sphere or a shell, for all the three cases we have observed that charge resides only on the surface. So since charge is residing only on the surface for these three cases, if I select this as the center of the spheres, for three different points, let us see what will be the electric field. One point is inside, another is just outside, point C is completely outside. So for a point A, which is at a distance small r from the center, I will construct one Gaussian surface to determine the electric field. And we know this Gaussian surface is not enclosing any charges. It is the same for all the three. This is your Gaussian surface at a distance smaller, again a Gaussian surface at a distance smaller. All the three are enclosing no charge. Since there is no charge inside this Gaussian surface, electric field inside the three different arrangements would be zero. So field inside a hollow conducting sphere, a solid conducting sphere and a hollow non-conducting sphere is zero. Now for a point just outside, if we construct a Gaussian surface just like the previous derivation and applying Gauss law, we will get the electric field at the point B as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q by R square, where Q is the total charge. And if I write it in terms of surface charge density, we know charge per unit area is called sigma. So Q by 4 pi R square can be written as sigma divided by epsilon naught. So the same is true for all the three cases. And if your point is completely outside, which is at a distance r dash, again we'll construct a Gaussian surface, and this surface is enclosing again the same amount of charge. So the field at the point C, which is just outside the sphere, would be 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. It is enclosing a charge Q, but this time the distance is not r, it will be r dash square. Or if you want to write it in terms of sigma, multiply and divide with capital R square. So 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q into R square by R dash square into R square. So Q by 4 pi R square can be written as sigma into capital R square by epsilon naught into R dash square. So this will be the result for a point which is outside. So now if I plot a graph to represent the electric field variation from the center, the graph would be, see, from center we are drawing a graph. Electric field versus distance from center to R and beyond it. At center it was 0. Till you reach the surface there is no electric field. So electric field from 0 to R is not present. And on the surface we have a maximum value of the electric field, which is sigma by epsilon naught. And as you go outside, the field again starts decreasing with distance. So the nature of the graph would be a curve which is 0 from 0 to capital R. So this is the variation of electric field for a conducting sphere.